All right, this is great. So this is a good juxtaposition from where you are now, and we're going to start building the story of Chris Wood. So we've asked our mutual friend Sam Wilkinson to write a few lines about young Chris Wood and what made him different. So Sam is one of New Zealand's best coaches. He worked for years at the West Brom Academy, but he's writing about his memories of you before you left for England at Hamilton and Wanderers and Waikato FC. So he writes,
Yep.
my first real experience with Woodsy was when he broke into the Hamilton Wanderers first team as a 15-year-old in 2007. He was a pretty quiet and respectful lad back then and never had any ego about him, but he definitely carried himself with an air of confidence as though he knew he was going to be a player. He would often turn up to first team matches in Auckland still in his St Paul's collegiate kit, having played for the school team earlier that day. That passion for the game and desperation to play every single minute of football he could is a really good lesson for young players today, who often start wanting to pick and choose when they play once they hit a certain level. I would just pause there. Do you remember that? I think it's a good point he makes, that like that desperation to play. You'd sort of play for the school in the morning, and then you'd play seniors in the afternoon. You might play youth team the next day. Did you just had that bug? Like, what do you remember about that time?
That time in my life, I was just playing football left, right, and centre. I played every single day. So I trained once on Monday, twice on Tuesday. I trained school on Tuesday and then club on afterwards. Walked up the road to Porritt. Trained on Wednesday doing futsal. Double again on Thursday, school and then club again. Trained on Friday, and then as Sam said, I played school football at 8:30 in the morning for St Paul's, and then it was a dad taking me up to Auckland to catch up with the team and things like that to play up there. And then, of course, playing on Sunday as well. So there was no rest days. But as a 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old kid, I don't need rest days. I can just play football because that's what you love doing. And that's where I felt the most happiest. And luckily, I had parents that were willing to take me around the country. I know that's not the case for many kids, but I was lucky enough to have those parents that sacrificed a lot. But I just wanted to play football, and they saw that desire.
When you're 6 foot at 14, do you have a confidence in your own age group, and is it easier to take that confidence into senior football?
I wouldn't say I've never been a confident lad. I've never been like overly confident or anything like that. I knew I was half decent at school football and things like that because I was scoring quite a few goals, but I guess stepping up into the men's football team, I think it became quite natural because I continued to score goals, which made it easier. So it felt like, this is just like playing school football. Now play another game, score goals, and carry on from there. It's just natural. This is how I see football, just scoring goals. I think it was a bit lucky in that sense that I could carry on, keep doing that. But it's just one of those things. I think I was confident on the pitch, scoring goals, but off the pitch, as Sam said, I was very quiet, and to this day, I'm still a quiet lad. I prefer to listen than talk.
You're going to be loving this
how
then.
I am. I know, you put me really out of my comfort zone here, talking for 2 hours.
All right, Sam continues. So early on in that 2007 season, he started scoring regularly in the first team. I remember noticing that the ball always seemed to drop for him in the box. Foolishly, I thought he was just having a lucky run in front of goal. As the season progressed, it became clear that he actually had an amazing knack of being able to read and react to play in and around the goal. He was able to anticipate where goal-scoring chances would land like no player I've ever played with or coached. On top of this, he was a really calm and clinical finisher. Maybe not a scorer of great goals, but definitely a great goal scorer. He was always big as a 15-year-old and has obviously developed into a physical specimen. He also never seemed to be fazed if he missed chances, even at a young age. He had the confidence in his ability that he was always going to score the next one. I wondered if we could pause and talk about that goal-scoring instinct, because it's essentially made you the player you are, and that ability to anticipate where the ball's going to go and where to be. Can you teach that? Like, where do you think that comes from? How have you been able to read the game so well from such an early age?
Look, I think back when I was younger, I did believe it was just, I was lucky enough to be able to see and read the game quite well, and it just happened for me, and you can't coach these things. But I think as years gone on, I think it's something you can coach into certain players. especially ones that are, I wouldn't say a bit smarter, but just people are a bit more savvy with about it, because you look at percentages of where goals happen and where goals come from. You can really narrow down the chances where they're going to land. And that's a big thing, because then if you put yourself in those positions where it's only a 6x6 or 6x3 area, if you stand in that area, it's going to come near or nearabouts you if you're there for 90 minutes. So you'll get chances throughout the game, whereas if you're standing outside on the edge of the box or outside near the byline, you're not going to get as many chances. So I think as I've gotten older, I've realised that it might not have been luck. I just knew the percentages earlier without actually being told. Whereas now, if I was coaching a striker, I'd coach them to be in a certain position or think about getting in these positions as the ball's building up or out wide or coming through, because the likelihood of scoring is so much higher than, say, if you're outside the box shooting from 25 yards, you only have a 3% chance of scoring. Whereas if you're inside the box at 7 or 8 yards, if you get more chances there, you'll have a greater chance of scoring.
Yeah, it's a real superpower. I remember actually watching you play for St. Paul's, and you scored 4 goals in this game, but you didn't play particularly well. And I remember coming away thinking, shit, he got a bit lucky there, that the big lad up front. Like, what happened there? But it's because your ability, like you say, putting yourself in the right place, but also just like running through brick walls and putting your head on the end of things when kids that age would often shy away from it. So the bravery aspect was there too, as well. Like, has that always been you? You just have been fearless?
Yeah, I think it was just a desire to score goals. I just love scoring goals, and I think the desire to, at a young age, as you said, put your head where other people wouldn't put their head and things like that, because it's 15-year-old kids, school kids and things like that. You don't really want to sometimes, or you're afraid to get kicked. But I think I was just sometimes not the smartest and just thought, bloody hell, go for it, and stuck my head in wherever it was, even if there were boots there. I'm sure 1 or 2 times my parents were watching on the sideline going, "Jeez, don't do that, mate." But yeah, I just love scoring goals, and I think that's all I wanted to do. And I knew if I scored goals and I come off the pitch, in my eyes, I've had a good game, and hopefully in my coach's eyes, even if I haven't really played well.
It sounds to me as well like that accumulation of hours as a young kid on the training pitch, on the playing pitch as well, probably helped hone that instinct of where the chances are going to come from or where the ball might break. Like that kind of repetition of that whole 10,000 hours kind of thing, right? Like you've packed a lot of football into a young age and probably helped in your formative years of understanding of the game.
Look, yeah, I think you're totally right. I think if you actually like calculated how many hours of training or things I did over a period of 6-7 years, it would tick up quite quickly, because it was every day. It was just the same old, doing it over and over. And then there'll be times where you go watch my sister play football, and then I'm playing on the sideline anyway. You're not training, but you're still doing something with the ball to make yourself better. So yeah, I think the cumulative of hours is huge.
Did you ever, like a hot topic in kids these days is like burnout? Like listening to you and how much football you played as a young kid, was there ever any time where you're like, I can't be bothered doing this? Or was it always that burning desire, this is my dream and this is what I'm going to do? Like, was there a moment where you thought, fuck, actually, I could probably make a career out of this?
No, there was no burnout. There was nothing like that. It was just, I love playing football. It was probably one of the only things I was good at. And when you're good at something, you just want to do it over and over and over. And luckily, that's what it was. I've always loved the game. I've never really had a bad moment in the game or felt like I wanted to give it up. Yeah, I've wanted to play other sports. I wanted to play cricket. I played cricket all growing up. I wanted to try rugby. Done that for a few games, realised I'm not as big as I want to be in that sense, and got hit a couple of times and thought, nah, that ain't for me. I'll go back to football. But yeah, I think it's just one of those things. I just love football, so it wasn't seen as like a chore or anything like that, turning up to games or trainings. It was just fun, and it was with all my mates that I loved doing it.
There's a clip which I've seen go viral, an interview you did a little while back, where you talk about getting bullied because you played football in a rugby mad country. And I've seen like just hundreds of thousands of comments come, maybe not hundreds of thousands of comments, thousands of comments coming in saying, what the hell, how does Chris Wood, this big man, get bullied for playing football? But I remember it too. Like, that was my experience. You were kind of, soccer, as it was called back then, was looked down on a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about that? Was that at St. Paul's, before you moved to England? How you were seen by your peers?
Yeah, it was at St. Paul's. You're totally right. I think it was in like third and fourth form. Pretty much when I was like obviously doing well for school, but nobody really cared about football. In the school game, rugby is huge at every school around New Zealand. Everyone's had the best rugby team, the best people, and things like that. And obviously, St. Paul's was no different, even though their rugby team wasn't as good at the time as like Hamilton Boys, who were dominating the region and things like that. But yeah, I remember 3 or 4 kids. I can still remember their faces. I'd love to have remembered their names, but I got their faces in my mind. Who I can remember literally saying to me about like, you're just a pussy because you play soccer. And I'm like, come on, lads, like that's not the reason I do it. I love it. And they just kept on the same thing. You shit, you're soft, you're everything like that. And then that's what fueled me to want to play rugby. And luckily it's at St. Paul's, they have like house cups and things like that where you play house games against other houses. And there was a rugby competition. I thought, here we go, let's have a proper go. And use my size and frame. Lucky I was a big lad and bigger than these people and was able to run over them a couple of times. So got my end back in the end. But yeah, I can remember their faces clear as day saying these things.
Yeah, that's such good fuel. To continue the storyline, so to take us to 2009, you're 17 and Sam's dad, Roger, who we spoke about earlier, organises a trial with the West Brom Academy. And at the time, there weren't a lot of teenage kids going over from New Zealand to England, or those that did would often find it really difficult and bounce back quite quickly. But you went over there and had quite a whirlwind start. Can you take us back to that part of the journey?
Yeah, there's no problem. I flew over there with my dad. He came over there with me. We had a 2-week trial planned at West Brom, a week trial at Everton, and then there was going to be a week trial at Millwall as well. And so we had a good month over there that we thought, here we go, we can have a nice go at it. Flew into Heathrow, travelled up to Birmingham that night. And then the next day I was in for training with I think it was supposed to be the under-18s at the time. And as I was going to training the next day, the coach or the academy manager who I was speaking to, Steve Hopcroft, was talking about my age, and he's like speaking like when you're born and things like that. I was like, December. And he was like, so December 91. He's like, yeah. And he's like, so you're actually the year below us. So really, I was an under 16, so it made it even better for me because their season runs September to September. So, in a long story short, when I got to get in the contract, that played a big effect in it. Because if I came in trying to go for the youth team straight away, I wouldn't have been able to knock one of the strikers out to get into the team. Whereas I was a year younger in their terms, I was able to get through. But going back to going over there and trialing and things like that, I can see why people don't like doing it. It's a bit daunting. You're walking into a team where all friends know each other, all players are playing, they know how to pass, find runs. They've played with everybody, so they know where to move to pick out the ball and things like that. It's like if they came to our club team, I know where Steve runs to get in the box to cross, so that's where I'm going to cross it, rather than, okay, this new boy's turned up, don't know where he likes the ball, but I'm going to put it where I think he should be, and he's not there, so it doesn't look as good sometimes. But yeah, my 2-week trial was quite well. I went to the youth team, trained with the youth team throughout the day, trained a couple in the nights with the under 16s, and then played games with the youth team on the weekend, and scored a couple of goals, which I think helped a lot. I remember scoring at Blackburn away. We won the game 2-1, and I scored the winner. And then we played at home against Nottingham Forest. I think surprisingly, didn't even think that. Played against Nottingham Forest, we drew 1-1, and I scored again. So I scored 2 and 2. So I was like, hey, that's half decent. And luckily from there, worked out well.
Did you notice a big difference between the level of leaving what was the premier level of senior football in New Zealand to going into youth football in England? Was there a massive difference between the two?
There was a massive technical difference and understanding of football. They were more intricate on how they're actually being coached and people's touch playing wise and things like that. Whereas coming from playing men's football back home, it was more a result business. It's about winning games. How do we affect the team to win games on the weekend? Whereas going over to England, it is about developing players, especially at that young age, to get into the first team. So it was a little bit different. The pace of the ball and things like that came with time over in England, but they were very technical over in England compared to back home.
So I've got a story. Apparently there were two lads there, Ash Lovell and Ash Malcolm, who sort of took you under their wing. They were youth team players, I think, but like really helped you sort of get a footing there. So apparently the story is that after picking you up from your digs on the first morning at the club, you walked out of the house in bare feet. And they were like, lad, this is Walsall, not New Zealand. There's used needles lying around on the floor. Is that an accurate time frame? Is that what happened?
Yeah, that is very true. Ash and Ash are still two of my best friends to this day. I'm actually playing golf with them in 2 days' time. So, that is a very true story. I remember, luckily, they were two nice lads. Where we got the house, Mum and I, they were in digs just up the road. So they came down, grabbed me, and we walk up to the bus, catch the bus to training. And I was running late that morning, and like any Kiwi does, just goes out the door with shoes in hand. I'll put them on when I get up to the bus or something like that. I'm getting up halfway up the road. They're like looking at me weird, and I'm like, "What? What?" And they're like, "Why have you got bare feet?" I was like, "Oh, because I was rushing." And they're like, "No, put your shoes on, lad." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do it when I get to the bus." They're like, "No, you can't do that. This is Warsaw, or Great Bar at the time." And it was like, "You cannot be wearing no shoes around here. There's some dirty stuff around." And I was like, "Oh, really?" He's like, "Yeah, this is not New Zealand. You can't do that over here." So from then on, I had to put my shoes on before I left the house, which was a bit shit for me. I like walking around in bare feet, but yeah, that's one of their fond stories that they bring up all the time. They never let me forget that one.
That is such the
key. But they're your tools, right? Your feet are your tools, essentially. So if anything happens to them, like that's your job done.
Yeah, definitely. To be honest, didn't think about it back then. It was just our feet are hard. We're Kiwis. We wear bare feet all the time. We've got hard skin. We're fine. It's normal. I'd be all right.
So there's many great parts to the Chris Wood story, but this is perhaps one of my favourites. So you're making an impact at the West Brom Academy, which leads to a call up to the reserve team where you scored a few goals and got quite a prolific reputation. And then injuries to several West Brom players got you a surprise call up to the first team for a Premier League match against Portsmouth in 2009. So this is just the time frame. We're talking about less than a year since you left Hamilton and you're playing and you get a start in the Premier League. Take us to the beginning of that story.
Yeah, I think my trial happened in 2000 and in 2008 it was. Went over there. I can't remember what time frame it was. I think it was just before Christmas or something like that. And obviously got the scholarship program. Went back to New Zealand. Done the first 6 months back at St. Paul's. Still playing football and studying and things like that. And then moved over to the UK in June 2008, ready for the 08-09 season. And yeah, it was a slow process for me. The first 6 months at West Brom, hardly played in the youth team. Found it really tough to try and break in, adapt to football. Came in overweight. Yeah, there's stories I probably shouldn't tell, but like I don't know if back home you use the skin fold test. Yeah, the calipers.
Yeah, I gave up on those a long time ago, Woodsy. A long time ago I gave up on those.
You can relate to the story then, definitely. so on it, it's got like numbers 1 to 10, which is 1 to 20, which is the millimeters. And I was doing my skin folds for the first time in England, and Ash Lovell, one of the boys were walking past when I was doing mine, and the physio was grabbing, or the sports scientist was grabbing my belly around my abs and things like that, and it had like the 4 on it, and the guy's like, my mate Ash is like, oh, that's decent, you're really, really thin, that's really good. And the sports scientist went, no, it's already been around once. So it's 24 millimeters. I was like, oh, I just remember that. I was just like, oh, and he was just like, oh, you fat bastard. I was like, cheers, mate. Cheers.
Was the youth dressing room like that brutal as well? Like, I can imagine it'd be quite intimidating. Like, if you show any weakness, are lads just piling in on stuff like that?
Oh, massively. So you try and keep a lot of stuff under the radar. There was a few stories where obviously you all have individual jobs and things like that. One of them is like kit. So they have to, if there's any kit lying around the dressing room, at the end of the day, they have to put it in the bucket, take it around to the laundry. And people used to just take the piss out of the kit men that do it, or like the under 18 boys that it was their job. So like they'd leave slips in the shower, or they'll like throw slips at the kit man, hit them in the face after using them and things like that. And it's just horrible. But yeah, dressing rooms for under 18s were ruthless. You had people taping up gear, cutting out bits in their underwear and things like that, deep heat in their underwear, taping them up into balls and all of that. That took ages, cutting people's shoelaces, all that sorts of stuff.
Deep heat in the undies is a nasty one. That's a nasty
That's a
one.
real asshole move, that one.
That's when you know you've pissed someone off majorly. You ended up having to go to the laundromat asking for another pair of slips just to walk home in.
So to continue that sort of timeline, that call up for the first team, how much of a surprise did you think you were always a few injuries away, or was that totally out of the blue?
It was probably totally out of the blue, or very much so. I never really thought. I obviously moved through the youth team to the reserves quite quickly, done quite well in the reserves after Christmas. After I came back, I came back to New Zealand at Christmas after I moved over there. And everybody that I spoke to when they came back, everybody was like, oh, you're a different man once you came back from Christmas. You felt freer, you started playing better football, you just looked better. So I think the first 6 months was a bit of acclimatizing from moving country, moving culture and things like that, getting used to the footballing world. So I was quite lucky. I moved from youth team to reserves quite quickly, done well. I think I had only trained with the first team like 2 or 3 times after being just like, oh, they need an extra man, called up and trained, dropped back to the youth team for a couple of days, and then they need another guy. And then, yeah, it was just a Friday, walking down the corridor, and I was walking past the manager, and he just stops me and goes, Woodsy, you got your tracksuit? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, your tracksuit to travel? I'm like, no. He's like, well, you better go home and get it because you're coming down to Portsmouth. You're on the bus to Portsmouth that leaves in 45 minutes. And I was like, shit, what do I do? I don't have a car at this point. I don't have my license. I'm like thinking, well, the bus is going to take me 20 minutes to get there, and then mum can bring me back. Can that work? And then I was like, oh, that's not going to work. And then luckily one of the coaches was like, I'll drive you back to your place, get your gear, and we'll come. So I remember driving back there, running in the house, literally ran in the door, ran upstairs, and I was shouting to mum, I'm off to Portsmouth, just getting my gear. And then I was back out the door within 30 seconds, got my gear and straight out. And my mum was like, what the hell? Didn't have a clue what I was doing, where I was going, other than me just saying I'm going to Portsmouth. She might have known the first team's playing in Portsmouth that weekend. I'd highly doubt it because I'm sure a lot of people didn't really. But yeah, and she had to call the academy manager 20 minutes later and be like, what's my son doing? Where's he going? Like, he's just ran in the house, grabbed his gear and ran out. I don't know what's happening here. And then she got explained to by the academy manager, like, look, he's going to the travel with the first team. He's going to be on the bench tomorrow. He's having this time. Hopefully it should be a good occasion for him. Would you like to go down? To my mum? And she's like, oh, no, it's his thing. He can do it and like enjoy that time. And they were like very insistent, like, no, I think you should go down and experience this. Whether they knew that I was going to get on or not, who knows? But they think I'm sure these academy managers and people who spoke to the first team environment knew that there was a chance that I could get on, and something that my mum would never want to miss.
What do you remember about your debut? Because 17, I think I saw that was Sol Campbell was like the Portsmouth defender at the time. It's this whirlwind that's happening really fast. Were you full of like traveling with the team and thinking about getting on? Do you have memories of it?
Yeah, I do. I mean, traveling was the big one. You walk onto a bus and, everybody's got assigned seats and you're sitting there going, where do I sit? And as soon as you get on, someone goes, oh, you can sit here. There's a free one here. You sit down, and then Chris Brunt walks on and goes, what are you doing on my seat, mate? Get the fuck out. I'm like, oh, shit. Done it again. I think they've done it to me 2 times.
Oh.
And I finally found a seat. I was like, oh, thank goodness. Half an hour into the journey. Woody, we want teas.
Yeah.
Go make teas. Walking past everybody. Anybody want a tea? Yeah. Had about 13 different teas to make and bring them back and forth. Oh, yeah, we want another one. 2 hours later, I'm like, oh, gosh. So I was like tea boy for the first period of time. And then, the game was so surreal. It was a bit of a blur. I remember getting called up by the manager. Come on, you're coming on. Put your shirt on. Went stood next to him, and he was speaking to me, and I was just looking, going. And I can't remember that point in time because I was like just in an absolute daze. I just can't remember anything that was said to me. I was like, I'm just going to go out and play football. I just remember running on that pitch and then trying to do what I could do.